Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our show. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle. Today we have with us Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man. That sounds like a great title. Roger, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hey, Mike. Great to be here. I am a financial planner, have been for 25 years, and have walked the journey, countless times with people planning for and transitioning into retirement. So that's a lot of the focus of my business is how do you make that transition, or how do you create a life that you may not necessarily want to retire from. So this is what I noodle on all day long.
So that's interesting, and when you say that, it reminds me of something that I picked up from a book I read a few years ago, which I'm sure you have as well, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And the thing that I picked up from that is, why do you want to retire at age whatever? Because then you're going to sit around and wish you were back doing something. So he recommends kind of taking these little mini retirements where you structure your life and your business where you can take a month or two off every so often, every few years, and you feel like, wow, you got a massive break. And I think he even says something like, months and months off. But is that kind of the mindset you're talking about, where you don't really retire per se, you kind of shift gears and go into consulting or something like that?
Well, that's a good question, Mike, because that book is a mind-changing type of book. It really shifts your paradigm in a lot of ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that type of structure, I think a lot of people are embracing that follow Tim Ferriss, but I think it's a little extreme for a lot of people. I think the key is, though, that traditional retirement planning or financial planning is focused on solving last generation's problems, those one-dimensional problems of end of life, where really you're worn out from the type of work that you've done and you just want to rest. And the baby boomer generation is in the middle of blowing that whole concept all up. And I've seen this in my practice over the years of when people are retiring in their 60s, they're highly educated, they're very skilled, they have lots of wisdom, they have great networks, and they still want to be engaged in the world. And that doesn't fit most retirement planning processes. So it may not be that you take vacations throughout your life, although I do have a few clients where we plan it that way. I have one client where he quits his job every 5 years and takes a year and a half off. Now, That takes a lot. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and he's really good at it. But it takes some planning.
Yeah.
But for most people, it's less about that than it is, how do I gain more freedom and independence in my life? Because we feel like, we've all felt this, where we get out of college or you get that first job and we feel like we're a servant to that employer. And so when I talk to people on my podcast or in my practice, if you ask them what retirement means, it doesn't mean moving to Florida and just simply playing golf. It's really more about freedom and independence than it is those traditional stereotypes.
Yeah, and I have seen statistics over and over about people that actually do the traditional retirement, sit around for 6 months, fish, go to Florida, whatever, and then all of a sudden they're bored to tears and they need to go back into the workforce. So there's so many people that go back in as consulting or doing some things they've always dreamed of. But what you're mentioning is kind of looking forward into that feeling of freedom that you're striving for anyway. And if you can get that in your finances now, then maybe you can, quote unquote, put up with the workforce these days, because now you're kind of living on your terms.
Well, yeah, and the key is being intentional of how do you create that margin in your life so you can do more of the things that you want to do. And that's a big part of my practice is, for a long time I taught the retirement planning segment for the Certified Financial Planning designation. So teaching, prospective certified financial planners, and the standard process that our industry takes is very one-dimensional. It just focuses on saving and investing, and it's solving for last generation's ideal of retirement. And so what I try to do is take a much more multi-dimensional approach in not just focusing on, how much you have to do savings and investing, but how do you build better relationships, because that goes to the quality of life, whether that's with your spouse or with your friends. How do you noodle on building your income streams, either through education or networking or solopreneurship or doing things independently, and then how do you move the ball financially? So I think it's much more multidimensional. And what happens is you can, by acknowledging, hey, I'm not just going to retire and sit on the beach when I'm 60. I'm actually probably going to work until I'm 70 doing something, maybe not making quite as much. If you acknowledge that on the front end and start planning that way, literally, that could allow you to save less money today, or take less investment risk today, or retire, quote unquote, retire a year or two earlier. So it's really important that you acknowledge that it's more than this one-dimensional issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and isn't it kind of like how Stephen Covey taught, begin with the end in mind? Because if you have that end, then you can work backwards and go, well, if I want to be here, then that means I need to do X, Y, and Z to get closer. And I would even say, from what you just mentioned, sometimes if people go through that exercise that you take them through, maybe they are kind of like, or I guess I'll pose it as a question to you. Do you ever have clients that say, wow, that's kind of a revelation. It's interesting that this dawned on me, but that point that they get to where they go, this is a preconceived notion, and going through this thought process, that's an interesting revelation. I would suspect that you have a lot of clients that feel that way.
And they do. And actually, the really cool thing, Mike, is that it's empowering, because right now when we look at the studies about retirement and how people feel about retirement, people really feel like they're screwed. They feel like it's not possible, and the statistics bear that out. And that's because when people think about retirement, they think about how much of a nest egg do I need to build up? What is my number? So it's all a savings and investment issue. Well, if it's a savings and investment issue, let's think about, let's just unwrap that for a second, Michael, that means you have to build this huge nest egg, which means you have to either earn more or sacrifice your lifestyle right now in order to build that nest egg. And that's not a very good choice. That's taking your life right now, sacrificing your life right now. And if you're not willing to do that, or if you're not able financially to do that, then the only other answer is you're going to have to sacrifice your life later on by negotiating your goals away or your aspirations. So those are two really bad solutions. So no wonder we're all depressed about retirement. And the real secret there is, if that's how you approach it, you've given up all power over your life, because now you're totally dependent on the markets. So this more multidimensional approach actually empowers you to be much more intentional about things. So you're exactly right.
It also makes me think, when you were describing that, of a couple things. Number one, a watched pot never boils. And secondly, what you focus on, you get. Meaning, if you don't have that right perspective, like what you're describing, you're almost kind of wrapping your arms around that nest egg going, I need to watch this every second of every day, and I need to see what the market is doing, and they're calling and bugging the daylights out of you going, the market went up, the market went down, what should I do? When in reality, they're getting too worked up over these short-term things and just letting things ride out, because you've got that navigational needle set to where we already discussed. We know where we're headed, and we're going to have this storm and that storm, but we don't want to get bogged down with those short-term details.
Yeah, and it's if your life is dependent on what the markets do, it's worrisome, because you have zero power over any of that. And I think. Yeah. And as a financial advisor for 25 years, that's how I was taught. I was taught that you just keep throwing money at things, and you look at the the mountain chart, and you'll be a millionaire later on in life. Where we've gone through, two huge downturns in the market, where people get fearful because they see their wealth disappear temporarily sometimes, and they can't do a thing about it. And so their life is totally dependent on how their portfolios do. And that's not a very empowering way to live. And your investments aren't really meant to build or create your wealth. They are great for preserving and growing it over time. But if you depending on your investments or your savings to create wealth, that's a really poor proposition. The big wealth creator is, well, you, Michael, you're the wealth creator of your family and you and your wife. Just, it's through our efforts and our work. That's how wealth is created. So I think. I love that mindset. And I think it really is a mindset shift of, when do I want to retire? What is retirement really to me? How dependent am I on this portfolio? Is it for income or is it for, contributing and giving back? And I think that, probably the term retirement planning, people don't focus on the second word often enough of the plan. And I'm sure you could talk for hours on just that one concept alone. Well, if we think about it, the way we think about retirement right now is retirement is a date, right? It's a hard date that's like a cliff, and then we live a totally different type of life without work. And generally, we are approaching retirement because we're running away from some pain. We're running away from the boss. We're running away from the daily grind. And that's what is the motivating factor for a lot of people, is what they want to get away from. And that really can set you up for disaster because you're not thinking about what you're going to get when you get there. So if you're more intentional about having that end in mind, like you talked about, Mike, and planning, you can define what you're running to and have it be a motivating factor to get to more freedom and independence rather than just simply running away from pain. That's going to set yourself up for a lot more success in that transition.
Yeah, and I think, Tony Robbins teaches, we are motivated by pleasure and we run away from pain. And I think that we want to have those, working toward goals to draw us toward, like what's the why behind that retirement goal. And it's not just to, fill in the blank. It's got to be what's that visceral why, so that then you do feel compelled. And in reality, every single financial decision that you make, short of, a package of gum or whatnot, but when you can say, you know what, do I really need this thing or when you can reevaluate your spending habits without feeling like you're micromanaging yourself, but yet when you observe those things about yourself, you feel confident that, hey, I'm doing this because I'm moving toward this greater vision that I want to achieve because it's important to me because whatever. And I think that would be just a massive, massive mindset shift.
Yeah. So if you visualize it like a teeter-totter, all of us are making an equation, and all the decisions we make about our life is we are all trying to maximize our life today in terms of the fulfillment that we have, because this is today. This is all we got. But we know that we have to make sure we're okay tomorrow. Now, some people, they just live for today and they don't do any penance. Their teeter-totter is way out of whack. And other people are so fearful about tomorrow that they sacrifice the only life they have for some perceived security later on. Their teeter-totter's out of whack the other direction. So we're all trying to find that balance between living as well as we can today and taking care of tomorrow. So I have a good example for you, if you want, Mike, on how you can sort of do that. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah. So I have a client that, we redefined what retirement really meant to him, and he is now 50. And about 6 years ago, we were working, and he is a high-income earner, works really hard, lots of hours, and we were trying to get to a date. But as I started to walk life with he and his wife, we started to think about it a little bit differently. So what we planned was, rather than get to a date and think of retirement as a date, we thought of retirement as a relationship that we just glided into. So rather than say, I will retire at age 64, what we did is we planned intentionally beforehand that he would slowly wind his practice down over time. So he's a doctor. So we went from high activity lots of work, lots of income. And then we said, okay, on this date, when I turn 50, we're going to adjust our medical practice so I can have more time, and I'm going to give up some income, but I'm going to gain more margin and independence in my life. And we actually have 3 different steps of him slowing his practice down, his income going down each interval. So he slowly gains more time and independence in his life till ultimately around 61 or 62, he's not working at all. I think that means a lot more to him than some far off date when he can finally stop.
Yeah, and I love that image that you just described, that brings up, because I relate it back to personal development, goal setting type things, where if you have that goal of I want to achieve X, when you get there, now you're looking around going, all right, now what? And you look on to the next mountaintop, and it's like, and you feel the roller coaster things. And I've heard it said, I forget who said this one, but it's not necessarily the achieving of the goal, it's who you become on the journey to achieve that goal. So if you were to set your perspective in your case, don't even set that perspective on 60, like I'm retired, I'm done, and I'm getting out of my practice. You set it on 70, 80 to go, hey, that 60 is just one of the milestones, and we're going to have this and this and this in place, and then past that at 65, 70, then that's going to allow you to do X, and then at 80, it's going to allow you to, and then at that point, your retirement, quote unquote, at 60, whatever, now is not some event, major milestone in the completion feeling. It's just a milestone.
It's just a natural. It's part of the journey rather than some monumental date. So I think that's really well said, Mike. If we think about it, so I've been married 25 years. That's it's a long time, and she's a wonderful lady. And I heard this quote the other day, and I've been stealing it. Is over that 25 years, my wife has been married, I've been married to maybe 3 or 4 different women. Now she's always the same person, but as her life unfolds, she's changed in who she is, what her priorities are, what she cares about, and her hobbies and everything else. So she's a different lady than she was when I married her, just like I'm a different man. And I think that's something we need to acknowledge is we can set these far off goals, but those goals may not be as meaningful 1 year or 2 years down the road because our life will change and we're going to become a different person. So I'm a much bigger fan of setting far off aspirations, which are more malleable to change, and then setting really short-term sprints that are much more solid and achievable. And that way we can make lots of little adjustments as our life unfolds. So when the things that we care about change, we can pivot with that.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, if we were to take just this brief conversation we're having right here, how much of this is about money? And I would say very little. Money is very important, but it's that mindset, it's that approach, it's the goal setting, it's the plan, it's the all of those things of how really it. Probably we could term it and phrase it a life plan, because in life we've got to have milestones, and retirement happens, and money, you need money to pay for the things of life. But I just like the way that you approach things, where it's not, well, the yield and the APY, and no, all that is like, once we get the other stuff figured out, the money things, that's the granular technical, we can figure that out. And hey, as a CFP and a trainer and 25 years experience, I've got that taken care of. But you know what? First of all, man, we've got to figure out this stuff first. And I really like that approach.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but money is a horrible master, but a good servant. And a lot of times we think of money as the master and we just need more of it, where it really is just a tool. It's a tool to achieve something we really care about.
Yeah, and it really, how to get more money is providing more value to society, because if you're a business owner and you're providing more value to your community, you will get more business because people want to come to you. Even if you're an employee, the more value you provide, all of a sudden when it comes time for evaluations and reviews, maybe that raise is a touch more than what you thought. But so I think that it really is not that I need more money, paycheck income. It's I need some things to pay the bills, but boy, looking way past that, I want to make those contributions. And what is it in the financial planning world? I've heard said it's like, you've got the strivers and then the thrivers, and then when you get to the very end, you're like giving back or something to that effect.
Oh, exactly. In terms of what you do in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I can't recall the term that you're referring to, but I think that is extremely important. And I find I'm 49 years old, and I'm finding that role of being a mentor and giving back and helping out others very fulfilling, something that I've never experienced before in terms of, as I've gotten older. And I think that will just get more powerful as we age of, unlike past generations where, they were mainly, physical labor, very hard labor, where they literally were worn out. People that are retiring now because of the expansion of the life expectancy, you're talking people in their 60s and 70s. I know them that are really wise people, and they want to help. They want to be engaged, and they want to do things. And I think what you just referred to is a big motivating factor. They want to give back. They want to mentor others. And I think
because that's a whole different mindset than, wasn't it Howard Hughes that is known for saying, when someone asked him, wow, you're the richest man known to mankind. How much more do you want? And he's like, just a little bit more. And that mentality is hoarding and gimme, gimme, gimme. Whereas the other is, hey, how can I give back? And what's my contribution and my legacy? Yeah.
And the really cool thing is, really what happens, you give back, and that's a really cool thing for the next generation or for others. But ultimately, and this is a whole other topic, is the softer side of retirement, that from the time we were little kids, we learned to strive, achieve, learn, strive, achieve. From the time we went into kindergarten until we retire. As a person, as a human being, we have a fundamental need to have purpose, to be valued, and to be acknowledged, and to make a difference. And a lot of that in the traditional retirement planning way, that totally gets taken away from people. And you find people on the softer side really losing their way when they retire. So I think ultimately this whole mindset that we're talking about, Mike, makes us a lot happier.
It really does, because it gives you, like you said, that P word, that purpose and contribution. And studies have shown and research has shown that when you help someone, your endorphins and serotonin and all of those things that make you feel good, all those things start triggering, and it's like, hey, that was pretty nice. And I think that again, we're getting back to that mindset shift. So obviously, we could talk for about another 3.5 more days. So let's land the plane. And what's the best way that people can learn more about you and your podcast and anything that you have going on to learn more about you?
Yeah, this RogerWhitney.com is my website, my hub, and I have a podcast on iTunes, and I work directly with clients, and I have lots of resources to help people along this journey and really be more intentional about their life. So just go to RogerWhitney.com, and you can connect with me there or ask me any questions on this journey, and I will always respond.
Awesome. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate your time.
You bet, Mike. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.